called like a shill for the pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah.
Even though I've never like studied drugs, been paid by that industry. I drive like a really old Honda Civic.
I'm Adri Corti, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. First things first, please make sure to subscribe and hit that bell so you get notifications every time I post. Today, I am super excited to be interviewing Dr. Heather Caslin. Her pronouns are she, her, and she is currently a postdoctoral scholar at Vanderbilt University. So welcome, Dr. Caslin.
Hi.
Do you want to tell the people a little bit more about yourself and about your research?
Sure. My name's Heather. I did my undergrad and my master's actually in exercise science. I started at Virginia Commonwealth University, and I actually stayed there for my PhD. I specialized in immunology, even though my degree was actually like life sciences or integrative life sciences. But immunology, I would say, is my main field. And then I came to Vanderbilt. I was really interested in immunometabolism, so how the immune system interacts with your body's physiology and just kind of overall metabolism, especially in the states like obesity and diabetes, and then how your immune cells actually use metabolic fuel. So kind of a big kind of interaction effect between different parts of the body. And at Vanderbilt, I met you in a Women in Science group. So.
We did, yeah. That's how we know each other. So thank you for being on today, and we can go ahead and jump into the interview portion. So what made you want to pursue your PhD?
So I came to undergrad, actually, I wanted to do physical therapy. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and I was in track and dance at the time, so I was like, oh, I really like to be athletic, and I was actually in physical therapy because I'd hurt myself, and I was like, ooh, it'd be fun to help other people kind of get back to doing what they were doing.
Gotcha.
And kind of made it all the way through undergrad without knowing that research really existed.
Wow, okay.
We had, even thinking back, there were like grad students teaching our courses, and I don't think I knew they were grad students.
Who is this?
So I made it to the very end of undergrad and was invited to a research conference and was kind of like, oh, wait, this is very different from the like Einstein, working a microscope all day, every day, alone. That was my view of science research before that. So seeing, we actually didn't have any women professors in the exercise science part of our department. So seeing women present, I think, was a big part of it. Seeing like the breadth of research that happens. I don't think I was taught to like question, like, what do we not know from textbooks? It was just like memorize what's in the book. So that made me really stop and say like, oh, I need to figure out if this is interesting.
Gotcha, okay.
So I actually did a master's.
Oh, okay.
And knowing that like I have to figure out if I even like this.
Yeah.
And then I can go back to PT if I hate it or stay. And I think after about a month, I was like, yep, we're doing this.
This is it. I think you mentioned it, but where did you get your PhD?
So Virginia Commonwealth University, it's in Richmond.
Okay.
Which I love that city. So
oh, awesome. Okay. So how was your experience getting your PhD?
I feel like grad school together is kind of like two totally different pieces for me. My master's, looking back, was incredibly stressful. So in trying to like fit research into 2 years, you're also taking classes, and then we were paid by teaching. So we're also teaching in that time, and I was like working insanely long days and fitting it all into 2 years, which I loved. And like at the time, I guess I was younger and just so excited that I could do that. But then for PhD, I was like, whew, we gotta slow down just a little bit.
Yeah.
So PhD, I really tried to find labs that I liked the people. I loved my advisor and the research. So I actually generally had a very enjoyable PhD.
Oh, nice. Yeah. You never know what people are gonna say. What did your work-life balance look like when you were getting your PhD?
So I would say, like, from my master's, I knew, like, okay, you cannot work 12-hour days every single day for years. Like, you will burn out at least, if not have worse issues.
Yeah.
Like, I want to say die. You're probably not going to die.
Yeah. You'll get close.
You probably won't say in science.
Yeah,
It'll be that bad.
Exactly.
So I knew that I couldn't quite work 12-hour days. So I was definitely trying to, like, limit my time in lab, go home 5-ish. It never happens right at 5. But try to keep it so I'm not staying till 9 o'clock every night. Like, I knew I needed to take time off, but I didn't like go home for those time. I wasn't like doing stuff on the weekends. I still think it was very like, I need to focus on research. I can't do all this other stuff. And so I don't feel like work-life balance was as good as it could have been.
Gotcha. Okay. Room for improvement for sure. What kind of soft skills did you learn from getting your PhD?
I mean, you definitely learn like reading scientific like things, writing is big, but I would say you learn to write like a scientist. And so going back and trying to write things that are more general is really hard now.
You have to like switch your brain.
Exactly. You're really taught to write like very specific, use the most specific terminology, use jargon, which isn't great.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you want to be a medical writer, that's a great skill. I would say communication kind of generally. I've definitely learned how to present better, but that's something that still terrifies me.
Same.
So that's not something I would say I'm good at, but I can make it through. Creative thinking and problem solving and things like that are
definitely
skills I get.
They
just look different all the time.
So do you have any words of advice for people currently getting their PhDs? Me.
One, I would say kind of trust yourself. Some of that speaks more to like the environment than the PhD itself, but I guess even with data stuff, like looking back, there was a project that was like completely not working for me, I guess the first 6 months at least of my PhD. And it got to the point that I was like, I don't think I can do any of this. Is it me? Is it the science? Who knows? Like, this is all terrible. So I guess thinking back, PhD was great, but there's a lot of little stories that are a lot harder. Like, if the science is really like something's not going well for a really long time and you need to like reevaluate, that's something I think I tried to like hide from my PI. Like, I didn't want to upset him or like let him down, I guess. So I kind of for a long time was just like, oh, I can troubleshoot this and this and this. And I always came at it with this like positive vibe, but like it ended up inside I was like, this is all terrible, I hate everything. And so I think approaching that with like, hey, something's not working would have been better. And then even on the side of like interpersonal relationships, I think there's times when like there's interactions that are actually really negative. You try to push through, right? Like you're like, oh, it's me, or this will get better, or this is just how it is. And if there's really something going wrong, like trusting yourself is really big. I think as scientists, we try to push through.
Exactly. Yeah, I've struggled with that of how long do you troubleshoot and when do you come to the point is like, is this actually just never going to work? You know?
Or like, do I need help?
Exactly. Do I need to ask someone for help? Yeah.
The second thing I would say would be don't compare yourself to other people, which is something I'm absolutely terrible at right now.
Yeah. So you're in your postdoc and you're still working on it.
Yes.
Okay.
But as far as like, when you're doing science, everyone's science projects are different. So some people's are just going to work and some people's aren't. Some people you'll get data really fast and some you won't. Some you just happen to get a Nature publication and some you don't. And I don't think that that's often due to like the scientists themselves. Like a little bit of it, yes, but there's a lot that you can't compare. So I guess that's just something that always, if you like looked at the people in your cohort or the people in the lab next door, you're like, oh, they're publishing more, they're getting all these awards, and then it makes you feel like you should be doing those things. And sometimes you can control a little bit of it, but
other times no.
The last thing would be follow some of like your other interests and passions, because in research we're like, get the data, get the paper, publish it, get out. But like, again, everyone's kind of science is going to go in a different way, but everyone's careers are too, like even in academia. So I guess I say that I was really interested in like teaching and mentoring and outreach, and everyone's like, focus on the science, which I probably need a little bit of that.
Exactly, yeah.
I need people to tell me that.
Yeah.
But that's been like the most enjoyable piece, I think, of science to me.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's more flexibility than we have led on in the past.
Exactly. What does it mean to be a postdoctoral scholar?
So I compare it to residency in med school. So after you go to med school, you get your degree, and then you go on to specialize a little bit more. The same thing for a postdoc. So I'm specializing. I'm trying to find the exact area of research I want to kind of stay in for longer. So I'm kind of like building on my past research to figure out what I want to do one day.
Yeah. When in your PhD career did you decide to do a postdoc?
Probably known the whole time. So I feel like once I started doing research, I knew I wanted to stay in academia at that point, I think. And when I started teaching, I was like, okay, I really, really love this.
Gotcha.
So I think early on, I knew that I really liked that teaching component, even like undergraduate teaching. So I knew pretty early, and to go into a real kind of faculty role like that, you have to have a postdoc.
Gotcha.
So I think I knew pretty early, like, if you want to continue on that, you'll have to stick with postdoc at least for a while. Which makes sense. I mean, coming out of the PhD, I probably wasn't ready to mentor students going through their PhD. I probably wasn't ready to apply for like RO1 funding, like any of the really big roles. Even managing people is not easy. So,
Are you learning that in your postdoc, like managing people and things like that?
I would say through trial and error. I mean, Vanderbilt has some types of programming around it, but it's not like a business degree where I feel like you take more formal training in that. But you definitely, if that's something you want to do, there's opportunities to learn those skills. kind of through trial and error. But.
Yeah. What are the benefits of doing a postdoc? So you mentioned it's kind of part of the path of going into academia. Are there other benefits of doing a postdoc?
If you want to learn new skills or new science, it's great. So if you, I'm thinking about like industry positions, or there's different government positions where knowing some specific technique or some specific disease or something, if that's a job you want and you need to figure that out, a postdoc could be a way to get that experience. They actually have like teaching specific postdocs and things too. So even if you're not thinking research and like running a lab, there's some other types of postdocs. I get to grant write more than I did in my PhD, mentor more, teach, it depends. But
what were some of your expectations and preconceived notions about doing a postdoc?
I don't know.
That is an answer.
I kind of saw it as like a continuation of grad school. You don't have the heavy weight of like, if your project goes terribly, you don't defend, you don't get a PhD.
Yeah.
So I guess that piece is lifted off. You still have research pressure, but like if it all goes terribly, I just leave and I still have my PhD.
They can't take it away.
I was always told a postdoc is one of like the best times in your research life if research is your thing, because you don't have academic, you don't have classes, you don't have administrative work, you're not teaching unless you want to. You're not doing like service work, which faculty have to do unless you want to. I've made that not true. I've taken on too many other things, but I could do just research if I wanted.
So can you talk about the process of searching for a postdoc position? So what were some of the things you were looking for in a lab/PI? And then what kinds of things did you notice that labs were looking for in a postdoc?
So because a postdoc for me was a lot of like finding that specific research thing that I wanted to study forever. You're never going to be the only person studying something, but you should have somewhat of a little niche. For you to apply for grant funding and say, I'm the perfect person to do this, there can't be 37 other perfect people. To me, I was really interested in that immunometabolism piece. So how metabolism and the immune system kind of have relationships.
Gotcha.
So I just basically emailed a whole bunch of people who did that. I think I had a long list, and I emailed like the top 5 that I was really interested in.
Okay.
This was, I would say, with only about 4 months left in my PhD.
Oh, okay.
I think people will start looking sometimes up to like a year out. A year out, I did not know what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
It was kind of like, okay, the immune system a little bit, maybe obesity. I don't know. It just wasn't solidified.
Gotcha.
So it took me a while to figure out like this would be perfect. So I emailed people and actually just said, do you have room in your lab? Would you be able to write grants? Do you have funding? So publish postdoc positions. People will advertise if they're looking for one, but don't assume that those are the only possibilities. Finding a lab that fits your research interest as a postdoc is a little more important than PhD. PhD is really about just learning how to science. The environment's still really important, right? So I came from a PhD lab where most of us were really good friends. We all worked together on projects. We'd help each other out. Our PI was really supportive of us, I think scientifically, but also kind of personally. So I was definitely looking for that in a postdoc.
Okay.
So I'd still say that surround yourself with good people is important.
Exactly. So what do you think the labs are looking for in you, within a postdoc candidate?
At most basic, that you're interested in their science. You want to help the lab. So some of what I work on is what my PI works on.
Okay.
I'm starting to build kind of my own identity, but being excited about their science, I think, is number one. I think everyone were asking me okay, what exact project do you want to work on if you come in? It wasn't like, we're going to make you work on this.
Gotcha.
I'm not sure I was prepared for.
Yeah.
For one person, I was just kind of I don't know, whatever you want me to work on. I could get excited about any project. And that's what made me figure out that the lab I'm currently in is what I wanted. I could figure out what exact projects I really wanted to work on, and I could see how that would advance my career and what I could do with those projects. Whereas the other lab, I was teach me everything.
Yeah, I see. Okay.
Which still, would have worked out, but I think that's where I meshed with this advisor or this mentor better too, because I could talk about what I wanted.
Yeah.
I know in general they're looking that you can complete a project, so having publications or having a dissertation that your mentor can say this will be a publication is important. So I actually didn't publish mine till later. But he could say these are projects, they're getting wrapped up, they'll be publishable in decent journals.
Gotcha.
That was important. Basically kind of give your dissertation defense at your interview, so you kind of talk about your science. They get to see how you talk about science, think through science, answer questions. So I assume that's part of it. But I think a lot of it, at least in the labs I was looking at, wanted to see that you fit in too. So
exactly.
That's important to me, is that the lab also wants what I want.
Exactly, yeah. So you've talked about this a little bit, but what made you want to do a postdoc at Vanderbilt specifically?
So I would say the people that I was working with.
Gotcha.
It's funny, the only 2 people I interviewed were both at Vanderbilt.
Oh, okay.
So I actually interviewed for 2 labs here, and both were great. Vanderbilt has tons of resources and money in research, which coming from a big state school was definitely like, whoa, amazing.
Yeah.
Vanderbilt to me, so collaborative. It really seemed like, and now I know this, but like you can go knock on anyone's door or email anybody and be like, hey, I have this idea, can you help us do it? Or can we figure this out? Or like, I come to your lab meeting? And everyone just says yes. So that's a really cool thing that I don't know is always true for other places. Like I don't feel like it's that competitive. I feel like everyone kind of supports each other.
Exactly.
That to me is like Vanderbilt's #1 attribute.
Definitely seen that too. Everyone says yes if you need help every time.
They're like, come on in today. I'll do yourself right now.
Yeah, like, are you free in an hour? You're like, okay.
So that's really cool.
Yeah, definitely. So how long have you been a postdoc, and how much longer do you think you will be a postdoc?
So I am finishing like year 3, basically. Postdocs, because everyone kind of does them for a different reason, lots of people will go into different jobs after. It's really like you play by ear. You leave when you have what you need. To be a faculty member, I definitely need some publications. So I'm trying to get those out.
Gotcha. Yeah. Number 1.
If I can get a grant, that'd be great.
Yeah.
It isn't required.
Okay.
So I think I'm starting to think through like publishing, writing some of those end grants. If jobs were available this year that seemed great, I'd probably start applying, knowing that faculty positions take a really long time to get. So a few more years probably.
Gotcha. So what kind of mental health resources do you think Vanderbilt offers to postdocs? And do you think they offer a sufficient amount, or could they be improved?
I've utilized their counseling services. Stacy Satchel's the graduate life coach. She can actually talk to her as a postdoc too. So those are at least available. I mean, there's some seminar type things that they do. I don't know what else other schools do. So those are about what our resources were in grad school. So I definitely say make use of that free counseling, that free mental health care as long as you can.
Yeah.
It's expensive in the real world.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, I think it's really big. I don't know what else like could be done though. I mean, I would say like looking back, my PhD experience was really great, but there's still, I mean, I went through mental health counseling or therapy for like anxiety and depression like symptoms.
I feel like most people do actually in grad school use some sort of mental health resource.
Like even if everything is decent, and like I still ended up with like TMJ or like jaw issues towards the end, like it's still a really stressful experience even if you don't have all of the added like interpersonal type things that could compound your stress in grad school. So like there has to be more. I would say from what I know about resources, Vanderbilt offers great ones.
Definitely.
But is it enough? I don't know.
Gotcha. From just talking to another postdoc that they wish they had like a committee, because graduate students have committees. So that's not really mental health. That's just more of like a resource. Have you ever thought about?
Vanderbilt does do that if you're on training grants.
Oh.
So you can actually, schools can apply to the NIH to be able to fund 5 or so trainees, and some of that can be graduate, some can be postdocs. But in part of that, they kind of explain how they'll train you, and part of that's making committees.
Oh, okay.
So I came in on a diabetes training grant. So Vanderbilt actually funded me the first 2 years, and then I wrote a grant to fund myself. And that I had to make a committee.
Oh, okay.
And it's a little bit less stressful because they're not like approving your dissertation.
Exactly.
You're not taking an exam.
Yeah.
They're more to be supportive.
Okay.
So my like advisor actually like just has everyone do it, whether they're on a training grant or not.
That's great.
Which is super cool.
Yeah.
So I definitely advise that. And I do think like in me writing grants now, it helps to show like that's something you can add to your grant is like I'll make my own committee. And I've even heard of like early faculty members kind of forming a committee that will help them with science and then just general career advancement. Wow. So yeah, I think people are starting to do that a little bit more for just like, can you make sure I'm on the right track?
Exactly. That's very good to know.
Make a committee if you have the opportunity.
Don't let anyone stop you. Just go do it. So how has your work-life balance been during your postdoc?
Probably better, I guess. So in like master's was terrible. Let's be a little bit better for PhD. I knew going into a postdoc that I wanted to start a family probably in that general time. You can't really plan it, but knew going in that like eventually I'd like to have a child, and you can't stay till midnight every night.
If you want to have a baby.
So I think people either approach that with like, let me do as much research as I can to prepare because I can't do as much later. And mine was kind of like, if I do that, I don't know how I'll transition. It seemed really stressful to think about leaving at 5. So I was like, let me start practicing.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I think I've tried to even more kind of have time outside of work. It takes like mental effort to not think about work.
Exactly.
To be able to relax and not be like, I have to do this and this and this.
Exactly.
And like, oh, I need to go write that.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if it ever will go away, but
yeah, I hope.
I have to practice that. So.
Yeah. I'll be doing something and then just be thinking about my thesis project, and then 5 minutes go by and I'd be like, wow, I wasn't even realizing it. It's just like such a almost tick now.
Yeah, or you're like at dinner with friends and you like feel like you can't fully enjoy it.
Yeah, so. Yeah. You have to practice, definitely. What is the difference between being someone's boss and being someone's mentor in academia?
I think as a boss, you don't really have to care about the person. A lot of bosses do, right? But your job more to make sure the work gets done and that you're just like overseeing that people are working, right? But being a mentor, you should care about where they want to go. Like a boss is kind of concerned that you're doing this work, and a mentor is like, well, where do you want to be after that?
Gotcha.
How can I help you get there? Probably even more than that. I know we throw around the term sponsor even more than that now. So a mentor would be like, I guess, advising you. So if you have questions, a mentor would help you answer them or find resources. Whereas a sponsor is really what most PIs should be, or lab heads should really be like, if you're not in the room, they should be positively talking about you to their colleagues. And like, is this opportunity open? We're trying to find a student here. I'm looking for a postdoc next year. And they're like, oh, I have a great grad student for you. Like being a sponsor is really even like going that next step from mentor.
Gotcha.
So that's even a kind of bigger thing I think academics are starting to think about what their role is. Really caring about the people is super important.
Yeah. So why is it important to have a good mentor or sponsor in academia?
Because it's hard.
Yeah.
All of it is really like science. There's just days that it's like, this isn't going to work.
Yeah, exactly.
Like your projects will always take a dip. No one's project ever works perfectly the whole time. So science itself is like that. I mean, getting a job after science is hard. So helping you figure out where to go next. I mean, there's so much that I think the idea of academics is kind of gate-kept in that, like, I think coming into grad school, you don't know what you're expected to do except, like, show up. If someone was just saying, like, you have to do qualifying exams, like, you need someone to help coach you through that.
Exactly.
How do you prepare for that?
Yeah, you're like, what is that?
And so there's just so many little things you kind of need coaching through.
Exactly. So if someone in academia thinks their boss is not a good mentor, how should they go about finding a better mentor?
First, I would just say it's not always a super formal relationship. And then I don't think that you ever really only have one. So we always think about the person that's like the head of your dissertation committee, or the person funding you on their grant, or the person that you work in their lab, like that's your mentor. But normally, one person can't be everything to you. So if that person isn't everything to you, that's totally normal. I think that you need a certain good level of camaraderie with that person to do well. So I do think that the person mentoring your research should be a decent fit.
Yeah.
There's definitely people that are not good fits with each other, and that I don't know if you can like build around.
Gotcha.
But I do think if you're struggling, like I know the first time I kind of encountered this was when I started teaching in my master's. The person that I was doing research with, and I have very different teaching styles, that person's answers are not going to be helpful to me.
Yeah.
So I need to figure out someone who can answer these questions and like how to do this. If you're interested in industry, maybe you want people who can like help coach you to get there. And someone in academia their whole career can't do that well. If you're a woman in science, if you have other identities, your main mentor can't relate to that. I think it's hard for them to coach you through circumstances. I think having people who you relate to on different levels. If your project's cancer, you need someone who can help you with cancer biology. So there's a lot of different ways you can pull in mentorship, and even like peer mentorship is bigger, I think, than we give it credit for. Even like knowing someone outside of your immediate bubble is good. If there's like a conflict in your bubble, you just need someone separate to either just like complain to or actually get good advice from.
Gotcha. What is science outreach and why is it important to you?
So doing a PhD, I really loved research. Get to like think and read and play in the lab every day.
Yeah.
But I really found like teaching and like talking to other people about science was really refreshing sometimes. I feel like there's levels to it, right? Like community outreach would be talking to like the kids on the block about science, or going to the science museum and helping there, going to a Girl Scout troop and talking about science, or going to K-12. But you can also have outreach with like cancer survivors group or people who have cancer. Like there can be outreach at many levels, so it's mostly just like taking research and science and kind of bringing it out to the community.
Gotcha.
Kind of helping show them what science is being done, which A is good because the public funds most of science.
Yeah, so they should know.
I've really enjoyed kind of like working with kids and bringing science to like the next generation of hopefully scientists.
Yeah. So how can science outreach be used to increase equity and diversity in academia?
So this question I struggle with because I feel like, I mean, there's a lot of layers to like why we're not diverse, or as diverse as we could be. So some of it we need to have people coming into undergrad and then coming into a PhD program.
Exactly.
And, like, it's getting people to stay. So I think making the environment more conducive to diversity would be important.
Gotcha.
But I think there's still a lot of people who don't know what a science career looks like. Still have the idea that like to be a scientist you have to be Einstein. I mean, I would never have thought I could do that.
Yeah.
I don't think I know what research looked like.
Yeah.
I didn't know where I could do research. You don't know, okay, like what do I do with a PhD? I didn't know any PhD scientists. So I think in showing kids or even like undergrads what a real scientist looks like is so important.
Yeah.
Because so many people kind of leave or like ignore that possible route of their future before they've even considered it, which definitely happens a lot more if you don't see that, right? If Bill Nye is the only person you've seen as a scientist, you're like, I'm not Bill Nye. I think in seeing more diverse people being scientists is really important.
Yeah. Yeah, I think representation is a huge thing. If someone looks like me is doing well in this career, I bet I could do that too, kind of thing.
Yeah.
How did you get involved in science outreach, and what are some of the things you've done in that space?
Our department in my master's kind of brought kids in like the local 8th grade through like once a year to kind of see all our lab space, which is cool. In Virginia, it's called Summer Regional Governor School, so you can actually go to a summer camp for science. And so our lab got to like teach them a cancer lab. I mean, at Vanderbilt, there's actually a ton of science outreach opportunities. So they have a whole outreach department, kind of, but they like bring high school students onto campus once a week. So I actually got involved kind of helping teach some of those classes. Through the Women in Science organization, we got to do that, which was really cool. And then through kind of meeting people in that outreach organization, I've helped tutor for them now. And they actually have a couple programs where they'll send scientists into the school. So I've actually spent like one day a week going into K-12 in
That's
Nashville.
awesome.
And we kind of like figure out what they're supposed to be learning, and then try to make cool labs or demonstrations and stuff like that. So it's been super fun. Working with kids has been like the way I've done it.
Gotcha. Okay.
I mean, people will do like kind of science, they'll call it, or something where they'll like go to a brewery and talk about science for an hour, and like whoever wants to come listen to science, those would be all adults clearly, but like there's stuff like that that's really cool. Or with coronavirus, I've seen some cool outreach events trying to like teach people about COVID or vaccines.
So it comes in a lot of different flavors, it seems like. So it's obvious from your social media accounts that you're passionate about communicating science and also debunking false information. So what started your passion for science communication?
So it was probably like, it was a couple of months before COVID started, but being in exercise science as an undergrad, there's a lot, I'm interested in like health and fitness and nutrition, and that misinformation was already rampant on the internet. So I saw a lot of people kind of like debunking some of that. I mean, especially as like an immunologist, there was a lot of like, drink this green drink and inflammation will go down, and you're like, okay, what does that even mean? It was like a couple months before COVID even started that I was like, there's space to continue to educate here, because I'd see like friends like repost like celery juice will cure everything, or like I'm trying this new diet or this new thing. You don't ever want to like attack someone's personal decisions, but you just are kind of like, well, if I educate this way and they happen to find it, maybe that'll help. With outreach, I can kind of like on Instagram would be a cool way to show people what a scientist does, who I am, like share some science. So I'd started that a little bit, and then COVID happened, and clearly the whole world paused and was like, what is this new virus? And then we realized, people don't know well what a virus is. Maybe you've learned it once in your life, but you don't remember it if you don't think about it. And so I was actually able to do a lot of social media kind of teaching on viruses and your immune system and what happens. And then vaccines have been the big piece that I think people needed a lot of outreach or a lot of kind of like reteaching on. It's tough. I don't know.
It seems hard.
I feel like I never realized how much the easier it is to just spread false information.
Yeah.
People don't care
Exactly.
to learn about the intricacies of the immune system.
Exactly.
The answer in science is never like yes or no. It's like maybe, or like in this circumstance.
Yes, exactly. It's not like satisfying for like the public sometimes.
Exactly. They're like, how do I cure my autoimmune disease? And you're like, ooh,
exactly.
No, maybe a little bit of this,
Yeah.
maybe this. And someone else is over here like, celery juice.
Yep.
Like people want quick, fast answers, and science doesn't have all the answers yet. So that's been tough.
Yeah. Like the celery juice industry and like the health industry, you can just make tons of money by getting people to believe that you have like the miracle cure.
That's what like personally hurts.
Yeah.
So when you start doing, I think, hardcore science communication, and I think an issue, we don't have tons of people in that field because like there's not a lot of money in it. Most of us are kind of doing it on our own. I mean, there's definitely people paid for that, but not enough. And so there's a lot of people doing it like in their free time, just for fun. You just get massively attacked by trolls and it makes it not worth it.
Exactly.
So you're getting called like a shill for the pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah.
Even though I've never like studied drugs, been paid by that industry. I drive like a really old Honda Civic and I'm being called like a shill.
Exactly.
But then I'm like, okay, that person, you're promoting the celery juice, like you're making money on this.
Exactly.
So it's all the people promoting misinformation that happen to be making money from it.
Exactly.
And then all of us trying to like just show some data. Or not. So it's tough.
So what does effective science communication look like on social media?
I think it can look different because I think what people want to see, I mean, people are so diverse that I think what you're looking for as far as like how detailed things are, I mean, everyone has a different opinion on that, or it depends on if you were a science major or not. I think everyone's science communication, especially over like debunking stuff, has to be like empathetic. It really has to come from a place of like wanting the best for everyone, because I think it's so easy to be like, well, if you believe that, you're not very smart. But like that's not true. Because even we've all fallen for misinformation. Like even as a PhD, I mean, if it's something that's not in your field, it's so easy to be like, well, sure, that sounds good. Especially when it's presented in like really pretty ways, or it's so easy to take one study and be like, here's the data, this is what I mean. But like, then you go to dig and you're like, 400 other studies say no.
Exactly.
So it's really hard to not fall for it. So I think just trying to like meet people where they are, answer people's questions more than like shove information down their throat, I think is good. Just really getting people interested. And I think over time, the more we can like teach how to do science, so how to critically think about something, how to ask questions, how to pause before you just share.
Exactly.
Will be so important. But that's kind of like a longer term goal. I really just want people to be better at kind of seeing that themselves.
Exactly.
There's so much of it out there.
Yeah.
You can't always like find someone to debunk it for you.
No, exactly.
Other really hard thing I think is that there are scientists and PhDs and medical doctors that are saying the misinformation.
Yeah.
So you can't even say like find someone with a degree in it, find someone working in that field. Like it's not even that easy.
Yeah. That's one of the worst parts of it, I think.
So it's like, how do you find accurate information? It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
So I guess I would also say being personable, showing them that they can trust you, going back to the data. So you're not like, I'm not the authority, I'm just helping you interpret the data. Like there is no authority. It's just we're all scientists looking at this data, trying to say, is it good or bad, and how does it fit into the rest of the data? That's what you kind of want people to see.
Exactly. So I guess that kind of goes into the next question of what do you think makes a science communicator trustworthy? Because we know it's not just having degrees.
I mean, you want someone to have had some sort of education or like long-term work in the field, because you always have to be a PhD, right? You can get an undergrad degree. There's actually like a really good science communicator who doesn't have a PhD that I'm thinking of, and like they can interpret studies probably better than me. But doing research in that general field is helpful, or just somehow knowing that field. So I'm even thinking like as an immunologist, people would talk about some of the epidemiology of COVID. I was like, nope, don't know. I can't interpret these studies. I don't do these statistics. Like, I need someone who does this every day. I think showing that you're like a real person helps with trustworthiness. But I guess I could just worry because people who promote bad information can do the same thing.
Exactly.
So a lot of it, I would just say, is like diversifying your sources, like showing that you're not the only one saying it. Showing that like major organizations, like medical organizations, the WHO, the CDC, like even when there was kind of really politicized stuff last year. Generally, what was put out by those organizations was decent, and then you'd hear scientists from many different fields also saying, like, this is good, or here's this one problematic thing, and here's the data to back it up. So kind of seeing what everyone generally is saying, there is a lot of consensus, considering scientists love to argue. Everyone wants to, like, have their hot take, and, like, here's the grant that's going to get funded, but in the end, like, we should all be able to be like, generally, we agree with these premises.
Gotcha.
So I think just kind of, like, showing that you're not the only one saying it, showing data versus, like, just saying a fact.
Exactly. Do you think it's often, some of the misinformation is connected to selling a product? So should we be looking out for that kind of stuff too? Like, if we're told something and then we're told to buy something, or...
I do think that that's something you can do in looking, like, is this person someone I should be, like, totally listening to? Or, like, is this a real thing? Yeah, looking at, like, oh, well, they do sell their own supplements.
Yeah.
So, like, most people will say, like, don't take these vaccines, or, like, don't take this medicine. Big Pharma's out there to make money, and then they're selling supplements that don't have to be researched. And they don't have to like, be even, like, approved by anyone. So I do think if someone's selling something, it doesn't always mean it's bad. There's plenty of good things being sold, right? But just, like, recognizing, like, are there ulterior motives, and how does that fit in with their expertise and what they work on and the data they're presenting, what other people are saying. Kind of like that's just one other piece to either flag or not flag in your mind as you're thinking about it.
So I think we've been talking about this a little, but what are ways that people can make sure the information they are seeing on social media is accurate? So I think you talked a little bit about maybe more of a consensus among many science communicators that this is the true thing. So is there anything else that you wanted to mention? If
it's just something you see once and you don't really care about, it's hard to, like, let me find people to follow. But if you're really interested in health, you probably want to follow a bunch of different people. If you're interested in nutrition or fitness, like, finding a bunch of people and kind of following them differently. I mean, if you see one specific claim, I would, like, it's super easy to Google a lot of it half the time to just get, like, if it's totally true or false. It's really hard to Google all of it or get into detail, but if you're just like, oh, did someone say this? Or, like, does celery juice cure cancer? I mean, I'm pretty sure if you just even type that in, you'll realize pretty fast, like, whoa, there's not data on that. As hard as, like, if it's a big account posting something, they won't respond to you right away. But asking, like, hey, do you have data to back this up? Or, like, what are your sources? It's really hard. I kind of said, like, in communicating and skills you learn in your PhD, scientists don't write well for the public. So I don't think it's easy to just go to PubMed and look at things. But I think that even as a non-scientist, you can kind of go to PubMed and generally look at a few article titles to be able to see, like, what are these articles all showing? If they all show, like, celery juice promotes weight loss or cures cancer or kills the coronavirus, like, that would be in the article title over and over and over again. We just need to, like, build trust with people, because if there was a major cure out there, we would be hardcore on it. Like, we're all working for years of our lives, like, devoted to figuring some of this out. And if it was a perfect answer, like, all of our lives' work would just be pointless. So we would probably care about that more than anyone.
I think if celery juice cured cancer, then cancer biologists would be like,
sweet,
okay, awesome,
this is my life's work.
But
I mean, there is a possibility that, like, something natural, something we're taking every day, something that's out there already could be a cure, right? Could help with a disease. There's tons of, like, anecdotal evidence that, like, for all these people, this works. If true, then the person promoting it should be the one trying to get scientists or doing their own studies on it. So, like, that's what we as scientists kind of start with normally. We're like, here's these anecdotes or these great ideas. That's the hypothesis. So that's, like, the beginning of our study. Now we build a clinical trial and see if it works. Because if it really, really worked, you'd want that data on the internet for people across the entire world to use. So if this drug or the supplement was really that great, any good scientist would do a study to prove it. Because then everyone could use it. So just, like, selling it on your own isn't going to be the way to get it out to the world. So.
Definitely not. So who are some of your favorite science communicators, and how did you find them?
I feel like it's through, like, you find people randomly. Or you'll, like, someone will share something cool and you'll click on their page. I think it's at science.sam was probably one of the biggest science communicators, or like most well known right now. So she was actually a neuroscientist who's been doing some science communication for a long time. She's probably one in the field that like everyone knows kind of across disciplines.
Gotcha.
And so I feel like some of it was kind of like finding her page. You then find other people's. Probably my favorite COVID one. Her name is at King Gutter Baby on Instagram, which is a funny name.
Yeah.
I know, like a lot of us will have like PhD at the end of our name to try to be more like appeal to degrees, I guess.
Yeah.
But hers, I mean, she wasn't doing science communication before, so Laurel's her name, before COVID. But she works in clinical trials, so in vaccine trials and like help with COVID, and so her proximity to that was really important. She's been able to speak to a ton of stuff around COVID in general, as far as the infectious disease side. But she kind of just started like randomly coming on stories and talking about it. But her personality is amazing. So she just really can like connect with people right away and relate to people. So I think that's helped her. I mean, she definitely like then talks about the science, goes back to the data, goes back to consensus. And then she definitely, there's many other science communicators she'll refer to, and people in virology and epidemiology and like all those other fields that are so important, so that helps. But
back to you more personally, after your postdoc, what kind of job do you want? Are you still interested in academia?
Probably. So most days, yes. I'd love to do the like undergraduate teaching side of it. I feel like you can do a lot with like having students design scientific communication like projects, or design like some sort of lab for K-12, so I feel like I can like keep all of those aspects. Asking questions and being paid for it is really the coolest part.
Definitely.
So if I can keep like research is still a really exciting thing. But I feel like every once in a while I'll see like another job pop up and I'm like, that could also work. So I guess with knowing academic jobs are really hard to come by. I'm trying to keep options open and kind of think about all the other things that would also be exciting.
Gotcha. Well, I think that kind of sets you apart, because in my whole like science career, I haven't seen a whole lot of like science communication classes or that being offered. So if you're kind of becoming the expert in that, able to teach that in classes and at universities, I think that would definitely set you apart, because I haven't really seen that before.
There's a few popping up that are good.
Okay, gotcha.
But yeah, even in thinking back to like my undergrad, I mean, most people who do exercise science want to be like a personal trainer or a physical therapist or even like a medical professional, physician, physician assistant, anything like that. But like communicating with your patients or your clients is the biggest piece, and we're not taught any of that either. Like you can like check mark what blood pressure is on a paper, but can you explain it to someone and why it matters? Like that's so important.
Yeah. And I think too with obesity epidemic and things like that, that I've seen some doctors be kind of harsh about their patients that are diabetic or obese or things like that. So I think communicating in a kind way is something that definitely needs to be taught.
Classifying obesity as a disease has actually been a really negative thing for patients. There's a lot of stigma around it. It might be worse than the obesity itself. A little bit unclear with the research. But there's just really complicated conversations in helping train the next generation of like medical professionals. We know there's so many issues with racism and ableism and all of that in science too, that like nobody talks about that in school. I mean, I hope like med schools are starting to talk about it, but it's not just medical professionals who have to deal with that. So I think in like teaching researchers to think differently about some of these problems, and then teaching like clinicians to think differently, it'll be really important.
I think so too. So how will you apply your science outreach and communication skills in your next job? So you talked about maybe creating some new courses. Did you want to mention anything else?
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I've definitely been able to find, like, now that I'm interested in some of this. So there's a podcast called This Week in Virology, and so Vincent Racaniello is the person who started those. So he's a professor who now just, like, does tons of podcasts. Talking about virology and immunology and all these others, kind of for, like, a general adult audience, which is really cool. I've gotten to know, there's a professor who teaches coursework, but also is, like, she regularly writes, I think it's for Shape magazine or one of them, so she helps write some of like the health articles for them, which I never would have thought like professors would be doing.
Me neither, not at all.
But there's definitely like ways to combine those things.
Gotcha. What are some methods you use to balance your research, your science communication and outreach efforts, your teaching efforts, and also having a growing family? It seems like a lot.
So I have a new baby.
Yeah.
I think you just have to think that like you're never balanced, right?
Exactly.
You're always like juggling things, and when you have a lot on your plate, you just figure out what you really have to pay attention to.
Gotcha.
Like I've heard people compare it to like, okay, so you have all these balls you're juggling, and at different times, some of them are glass and some are like rubber, so you can let it drop and it's fine.
Gotcha.
Or, like, I think that's where having mentors who like kind of help keep me on track. As a postdoc, you have a little more leeway. Like they can't totally control the same amount.
Yeah.
So I've definitely like, I feel like I'm constantly going to my mentor saying, I'm gonna go do this.
Yeah.
Like this is how I'm gonna get my research done.
Exactly.
I definitely try to like overdo that side of like, I promise I'll work Saturdays so that I can go do this on another day. I don't know, you just kind of trial and error it, and then you try to have people around you who help keep you in check so you don't drop any of like really important glass balls.
Gotcha.
But I don't know if you ever feel like you totally have it down.
Yeah. So I guess it is good to communicate with your PI/boss about what your priorities are like at that moment.
Yeah, I think being able to say like, okay, this is what my normal research is, and then like, I mean, I definitely have like, okay, here's my goals for the next couple weeks.
Gotcha.
Did I meet them? Is there anything I could have done better?
Yeah.
What should they be going forward? There's times I'm like, okay, well now I'm not doing this thing, so it's back to like focus on research really hard.
I see.
Or,
Okay.
like, I guess reflecting yourself, having other people to help you reflect a little bit.
Definitely.
That's where therapy can help too.
Yeah.
Especially with like family side and the stress side.
Yeah.
'Cause it all adds up. I don't know.
Definitely. I feel like all my videos or interviews are gonna, in the end, be like, get a therapist. That's always the takeaway.
Would it ever like hurt someone? No.
Exactly.
Especially for grad school centered podcasts, probably.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
I don't know, for anyone in life.
Yeah, anybody. Okay, so that was our last question. Do you have any last words for the viewers today?
Surround yourself with good people. I don't know. I think that's the best part. Science can be really, really, really hard. And I think my answer to like, did you enjoy grad school would probably have been different at the time.
Yeah.
So definitely like try to enjoy what you can. Surround yourself with good people. Even like listening to other people's advice. I don't know.
Yeah.
I loved your first interview and like your first podcast on like PhD advice.
Yeah.
I guess I'd even say like go back and listen to advice after you're in it. 'Cause I was like nodding along like that's good advice.
Yeah.
Like the women in science orgs, I feel like I found those because I was just like, okay, let's meet some other people going through this and just see how it's going. And then you realize like, so my PhD was in very interdisciplinary studies. Like there were physicists and chemists and chemical biologists all in it. And like our day to day was totally different, but a lot of our like struggles were kind of the same when you realize like there's these ebb and flows of research. You end up having like struggles with your mentor sometimes. Like there's a lot of relationships that if you find good people and are like really supported, that's so important.
Oh, definitely. It can just reaffirm how you're feeling. Definitely. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for being on today. So you can find Dr. Caslin on her Twitter and Instagram accounts that I'll put here at the bottom and in the description box below. So thank you for watching. Please make sure to comment your thoughts if you have any questions, if it was helpful, and make sure to hit subscribe if you loved it or if you hated it. And I'll see you next time.